A young black man helped a young woman millionaire with a flat tire. The woman ended up falling for him. "You look like you've been out here all day," the boy said, squinting in the bright Colorado sun. He was about 19, tall but lean, with deep brown skin. His sleeves were rolled past his elbows. Sweat clung to his neck, and the laces of his worn work boots dragged in the dust as he stepped off the gravel shoulder toward her broken-down Porsche. Sienna Taylor lowered her sunglasses. She looked more surprised than scared. "I've been here long enough to hate every cactus in a 5-mile radius," she said, brushing a strand of hair from her warm cheek. The boy chuckled, soft and kind. "Mind if I take a look?" She paused. They were about 30 minutes outside Grand Junction. No signal, a shredded back tire, and no other help in sight. His eyes met hers, calm, clear, not impressed by the logo on her car or the expensive flats she had ruined trying to walk back to the gas station. She nodded. He dropped his backpack, opened it, and pulled out a pair of work gloves and an old tool kit that looked like it had been passed down through generations. "You got a spare?" he asked, already kneeling. "In the back, I think," she replied, stepping aside. He opened the trunk smoothly, took out the spare, and got to work without another word. Sienna folded her arms and leaned against the car, watching. He moved with skill, efficient, steady, focused. He tightened the bolts with a steady rhythm. Sunlight bounced off his forehead and caught in the curls sticking to his temple. "You do this often?" she asked. "Sometimes," he replied, still working. "My uncle owned a shop in town. Taught me everything before he passed." She fell quiet. A few turns of the wrench later, he stood and wiped his hands on his jeans. "You're all set." Sienna reached for her wallet. "Let me—" He raised a hand and stepped back. "No need, ma'am. I'm just glad I came down this road today." Her hand froze halfway in her clutch. "You don't want anything?" "I've got what I need," he said simply. He slung his bag over one shoulder. She didn't know what shocked her more, his skill or his refusal. "What's your name?" she asked. "Jalen," he said. "Jalen Brooks." "Sienna," she said. "Sienna Taylor." He nodded once, smiled, and walked up the hill. The setting sun stretched his shadow along the cracked road. That night, Sienna sat on the balcony of her family's second home, a modern ranch above the Colorado River. A glass of wine sat warm in her hand. Her phone buzzed beside her. She ignored it. Messages from her publicist, her ex, and board members who had voted her out of the company her father built. They called it a graceful transition. She called it betrayal. But none of them, not her investors or tech bloggers, knew what grace really looked like. Jalen showed her. 2 days later, she drove the same road again, past the gas station, past the ridge, slowing at every shoulder. She knew it was silly. But something inside her wouldn't let it go. At the edge of town, beyond a line of old mailboxes and a leaning fence, she saw him. Jalen was on a ladder, fixing an old porch for an elderly woman. She parked and stepped out. He didn't notice her until the woman called out, "You got company, hun?" Jalen looked down, blinked, then smiled, cautious but curious. "Miss Taylor." "I was in the neighborhood," she lied. He climbed down. "Everything okay with the tire?" "Perfect," she said. "But I never really thanked you." "You already did." She looked at the porch, the nails, the ladder. "You do this a lot." "Sometimes. People need help. I like using my hands." They stood quietly. Wind passed between them. The smell of cedar and dust filled the air. Sienna reached into her car and handed him a cold bottle of water. Their fingers touched. She didn't look away. "Thanks," he said, opening the cap. "I don't suppose you like coffee?" she asked, He smiled, the first full smile she'd seen. Depends who's asking. She smiled too. Someone who's not done driving this road yet. The cafe sat at the edge of town, between a pawn shop and an old video store. Inside, the air smelled like fried potatoes. A dusty ceiling fan hummed above. Locals sipped warm coffee and swapped stories. No one noticed the woman in designer jeans and a gray blouse slide into the corner booth, except the server, who raised an eyebrow at her fancy shoes. Sienna smiled, ordered black coffee, and sat in the red leather seat. Her eyes scanned the window, looking toward where she saw Jalen working 2 days ago. She hadn't forgotten. The hammer in his hand. The calm way he moved. A bell rang. Warm air blew in. A familiar figure entered, covered in sawdust, sleeves rolled, hands darkened by work. Jalen nodded at someone behind the counter. When he saw her, he stopped briefly. Sienna stood, lightly holding the booth's back. "Hey," he said with a nod. "Didn't think I'd see you again." She motioned to the seat. "Join me." He sat slowly, unsure if it was a joke. "I don't usually have coffee with millionaires." "I don't usually chase mechanics," she said with a grin. He laughed softly. "I'm not really a mechanic." "You fix things," she said. "You fixed me." Jalen tilted his head, unsure what to say. "You were just stuck, that's all." "Sometimes being stuck is worse than being broken," she said quietly. Their coffees arrived. He stirred in sugar, watching her. "So," he said, "why are you really here?" Sienna breathed out, eyes on the window. "Honestly, I don't know. I just started driving. And ended up here again." He leaned back. "You're not used to being curious without a reason, are you?" she asked. He met her eyes. "I'm not used to people walking away from me," she said. Jalen looked down at his cup. "People like me don't usually get asked to stay." A quiet moment followed. It was heavy but not bitter. The kind that holds weight instead of avoiding it. "I grew up in a house where nothing stayed the same," he said at last. "Mom left. Dad drank. My aunt held things together with duct tape and prayers. I learned early, if something's broken and you can't replace it, you better learn to fix it, and never ask for help." "Did you ever ask?" she said. "I asked a guy once," he answered with a small smile. "It was cheaper." She laughed. It was natural. He liked that. He looked out the window at the church across the street. "What about you? What brings someone like you to a place like this?" Sienna looked away, thinking. "I lost something," she said quietly. "Maybe I never really had it. I don't know. But when I left the boardroom for the last time, no one looked me in the eye. They just handed me a check and said, 'Thank you for your service,' like I was leaving the army." Jalen tapped his fingers on the table. "Sometimes, leaving is the best part of the building." She smiled. "You're good with words." "I build fences," he said with a shrug. "Gives you time to think." They sat in silence again. This time it felt softer, more comfortable. Sienna reached into her bag and pulled out a small leather notebook. She slid it across the table. "What's this?" he asked. "An idea," she said. "A sketch for something I've been thinking about. A kind of community space, tools, mentorship, maybe even training programs, but it needs someone who knows how to build things." Jalen didn't touch the notebook. "You barely know me." "I know what you did when no one was watching," she said. "That's more than I can say for most people I've worked with." He picked up the notebook, turned it in his hands, and slowly opened it. Blue ink. Simple sketches. Rough plans. But the purpose was clear. "I'm not sure I'm the right person for this," he said. "I'm not sure I am either," she replied. Their eyes met. This time, neither looked away. Outside, wind stirred the dust on the pavement. Inside, two strangers sat with nothing but coffee, a shared idea, and a connection too new to name. "Okay," he said at last. His voice was quiet but sure. "Let's see where this road goes." The Carrington estate sat in the Aspen foothills, far from Jalen's neighborhood of cracked sidewalks and rusted fences. The main house stood 3 stories tall, all glass and steel, like something from an architecture magazine. The windows were spotless, reflecting a sky too perfect to be real. Every bush was shaped, every flower bed planned. Jalen stood on the front steps, hands in the pockets of a clean, stiff shirt Sienna made him borrow. It was neat, pressed, and unfamiliar, just like everything behind those big doors. "You sure you want to do this?" she asked softly. He shrugged without looking at her. "I'm just here for the food." She laughed and gently pushed open the door. Inside, warm light spilled from chandeliers. Laughter bounced off marble floors. Well-dressed guests sipped expensive wine and gathered around a grand piano. A jazz trio played quietly in the background. Heads turned as they walked in. Sienna's arm brushed his. "They're just people," she whispered. "No," he replied, scanning the room. "They're your people." A man in his 50s walked up with a fake smile. "Sienna, we thought you weren't coming." His eyes landed briefly on Jalen, then went back to her. "And you brought a guest." "This is Jalen Brooks," she said firmly. "He's helping me with a new project." The man didn't offer his hand. "Charmed," he said without warmth, then turned back to his drink. The room felt colder. Jalen stepped aside as Sienna slipped into conversations with ease, like she belonged there. He wandered to the edge of the room and stood by a table full of fancy snacks he couldn't name. He reached for a toothpick holding something that looked like meat, then paused and took a cracker instead. "You're not from around here, are you?" a voice said with a sneer. He turned. A man in his mid-30s, wearing a sharp blazer and holding a drink, stood nearby with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Excuse me?" Jalen asked. "Relax, just talking," the man said. "Sienna tends to bring home projects." Jalen's jaw tightened. "She didn't bring home anything." The man laughed lightly. "Easy, I'm just saying. She has a habit of picking up lost causes, dogs, failing businesses, strangers." Before Jalen could answer, a calm voice cut in. "Is there a problem here?" Sienna asked. The man stood straighter. "No problem. Just chatting with your friend." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Then find someone else to talk to." The man walked away, mumbling into his glass. Jalen turned to her. "That's what I am to them. A display. A charity case." She looked uncomfortable. "He's just a jerk." "Yeah, but he's not the only one staring." "They don't matter." "They matter to you," he said softly. "And I don't." She didn't reply. He stepped away from her, out the side door and onto the terrace. The night air hit him like a truth he hadn't wanted to face. He leaned on the railing, looking out over the hills and scattered lights. A few seconds later, she followed. "I didn't think it would be like this," she said. He didn't turn. "Didn't think I'd be on display." "I wanted you here." "Yeah? Or did you just want to feel better about yourself?" That stung. She said nothing. He turned finally. His voice was quiet but firm. "I'm not mad that you're rich. I'm mad that you thought bringing me here would make things easier for either of us." "You think I don't see it too?" she snapped. "The way they look at me since I left the company? Like I'm broken. Like I've lost my worth. And yeah, maybe I brought you here because I wanted them to see something real. Something good I found outside of their world." He stared at her. "Turns out," she said, her voice bitter. "You don't want to be seen, either." The silence that followed was deep and honest. "I've spent my life trying to blend in so I wouldn't get hurt," he said. She stepped closer. "I'm not here to hurt you, Jalin." "Then don't put me on display." That landed. They stood inches apart now. No music, no voices. Just the quiet hum of a world that suddenly didn't feel like either of theirs. He looked away. "You don't know what it's like to walk into a room and wait to be called the mistake." She let out a slow breath. "Maybe not. But I know what it's like to stand in a room and not recognize myself anymore." For a moment, the space between them didn't feel like money, race, or past. Just two people trying not to fall apart. He looked at her again. "I should go." She nodded, eyes wet. "Okay." He stepped past her, paused, then said without turning, "It wasn't the food. I came for you." And he walked into the night. The afternoon sun beat down on the gravel lot outside Thompson Hardware. The smell of cut wood and machine oil filled the air. Jalin stood in the shade of a half-built shed, hands deep in a box of bolts, pretending not to hear the car pull up. He recognized the engine, smooth, quiet, expensive. Sienna stepped out. She'd traded her heels for work boots. Her hair was tied back. Her face was red, but not from the heat. Jalin didn't look up. "Lost again?" "I was in the area." "You rich folks are always in the area when you want something," he said, dryly but not cruelly. She walked a few steps closer, stopping near the tools on the bench. "I'm not here to argue." "Good," he muttered. "I'm tired of that." "I wanted to say, I'm sorry." That made him glance sideways. "For what?" "For making you feel like a display in my world, for putting you in that situation," she said. "And for not stopping that night when it was clear you wanted to leave." Jalin sighed and wiped his hands on a rag. It wasn't about leaving. It was about being misunderstood. Sienna looked around, the dust, the wood, the open sky. This place was nothing like Carrington Estates or fancy guest lists. "I brought you into my world," she said, "but I never gave you space to breathe." He finally met her eyes. "Why do you care so much?" Her voice cracked just a little. "Because you're the first person in years who saw me without expecting anything. You didn't judge me, you just saw me." That left him quiet. "When I lost everything, the things that made people answer my calls, when I couldn't walk into my own boardroom without hearing whispers, you reminded me I still had value." Jalin folded his arms, cautious. "So, now I'm your emotional support?" "No," she replied. "You're my mirror. The only honest thing in my life." A breeze stirred the dust at their feet. Somewhere nearby, a table saw hummed to life. She reached into her bag and pulled out the notebook she once showed him. It looked used now, corners bent, pages filled. "I kept working on it," she said. "The community workshop, mentoring, job training. It's not a pitch. It's real." He took the notebook and flipped through it quietly. "You don't have to say yes," she added, "but I want you to know I meant every word." Jalin slowly closed the notebook. "Why me?" She smiled, eyes teary but calm. "Because you don't need money to be amazing." For the first time since that night on the terrace, he truly looked at her, not the wealth or the chaos, but just her. He nodded once. "All right, I'll help you build it," he said, "but one condition." "What?" "Stop saying sorry for loving something real." Sienna blinked, then laughed softly. Grateful. Deal. Later that week, they sat on the tailgate of an old truck at the edge of a lot. Plans spread between them, coffee in hand, dusk falling over the mountains. Jalin pointed to a drawing. You drew this electrical setup wrong. Sienna frowned. No, I didn't. He raised an eyebrow. She sighed. Okay, maybe I did. He smirked. You're lucky I'm patient. I'm lucky for a lot of things lately. She sipped her coffee, eyes on the view. They're going to come after me again. The board, the media. They think this is just a pet project. It's not. They'll say I'm throwing money at a boy I barely know. Jalen shrugged. Let them talk. You're not scared? I've been overlooked my whole life. It doesn't bother me anymore, but it does drive me. Silence followed, but it felt strong, not awkward. Then he added, almost like it was nothing. You're not the only one who lost something. She turned to him. I lost hope a long time ago, he said. In people, in fairness, in second chances. But you showing up every time, that changed something. Her voice softened. What did it change? He looked at her, really looked. Hope. The Denver Civic Convention Center shined in the late spring sun. Glass panels gleamed like armor. Inside, rows of seats filled with investors, media, and startup stars buzzed with excitement. A giant LED screen behind the stage showed sponsor logos and speaker schedules. Sienna stood backstage. Microphone clipped, hands slightly sweaty. You don't have to do this, her assistant whispered. Yes, I do, she said firmly. They need to see the whole truth. She adjusted her sharp black blazer and stepped out as her name was announced. Please, welcome Sienna Taylor, founder of Elevate Tech and former CEO of Carrington Green. Jalen sat in the back row, stiff in a borrowed blazer. His work boots didn't match the suits around him, but he didn't care. He was there because she asked. No, because he wanted to be. He knew today mattered. He knew critics were waiting. Sienna walked to the podium. The lights were bright, but she didn't flinch. She looked over the crowd, then down at her notes. But she didn't read them. I'm not here to talk about market forecasts, she began, or IPOs, or exits. A ripple of confusion moved through the crowd. I'm here to talk about what we lose when we forget people, when we chase power instead of purpose, when we ignore voices that don't wear suits. The whispers grew louder. You all know I left Carrington Green. What you don't know is why. Behind her, the screen changed, not to charts or solar panels, but to a messy workbench, hands gripping wood. A young man teaching kids how to build something from nothing. I left because the people I worked with stopped listening. They stopped believing that real ideas come from unexpected places. She paused. Last month I brought a young man, Jalen Brooks, to one of my industry events. You probably read the stories, the comments, the assumptions. She hesitated, throat tight, but kept going. What none of you saw was what I saw. A builder, a mentor, a man with more insight than some executives. I sat beside him for 10 years. She looked toward the crowd, toward Jalen, even though she couldn't see his face. I love him. The room went silent, not shocked, stunned. And if that costs me your funding, your respect, or your invite to next year's keynote, so be it. Gasps. Phones raised. The silence shattered like glass. She smiled. Just a little. Because I'd rather build something real with him than keep pretending with any of you. Then she walked off stage. Backstage, her assistant looked pale. Sienna, the press. Let them write, she said, pulling off the mic. I gave them something worth writing about. A few steps behind, Jalen stood frozen in the hallway. He'd rushed there the moment her speech ended. You didn't have to do that, he said quietly. You could lose everything. She walked toward him. Then let me lose it for a reason. He looked at her, his eyes tired but alive. "You meant it?" he asked. "Every word." She stepped closer. They stood inches apart, in the middle of the chaos. "Then I'm staying," he said. A pause. Then her voice, soft and breaking. "Good." That night, the internet exploded. Headlines: Sienna Taylor confesses love for unknown builder. At Tech Summit, CEO leaves fortune behind for a man with dirt under his nails. The backlash came fast. Investors pulled out of her project. Former board members gave statements, cutting ties. But something else happened too. Letters came, emails, handwritten notes from teachers, veterans, welders, grandmothers, stories from people who felt seen for the first time in years. One letter stood out. It was from a 12-year-old girl in Detroit. "My brother says I can't build things because I'm a girl, but you showed them. On that stage, you built something brave." Sienna read the letter aloud to Jalen under a sky full of stars. They sat on the porch of the new workshop they were building together. He leaned back, arms crossed behind his head. "She gets it," he said. Sienna nodded. "Yeah, she does." He turned to her. "You know, you didn't just break their silence." "What do you mean?" "You broke mine." 1 year later. The morning sun stretched across the gravel driveway of the completed workshop just outside Grand Junction, Colorado. Where an old warehouse once stood, now rose a clean, modern building. Pinewood siding, corrugated steel, large windows, etched in glass, Brooks and Taylor Institute skills, dignity, future. Inside, the scent of sawdust and fresh paint mixed with brewed coffee and cinnamon rolls, donated by a local bakery. Benches lined the workshop. Young people, black, white, Latino, Navajo, laughed, drilled, measured, built. Jalen stood at the front, in jeans and a navy shirt, apron dusted with chalk. He showed students how to cut a dovetail joint. Every eye was on him, not out of duty, but respect. He no longer felt out of place in front of a group. He felt at home. Sienna stood by the door, welcoming community leaders, donors, old friends. She looked different. Not richer, not more famous. Just solid, clear. Her phone buzzed every few minutes with press calls, but she didn't check it. Not once. Outside, guests gathered near a podium. Behind it, 2 American flags and young trees planted last spring. Jalen stepped up to the mic. He adjusted it with steady hands. He looked out at the crowd. Familiar faces. New ones. Then he spoke. "I used to think some people were just meant to stay small. That no matter how hard you worked, some doors never opened." He paused. "Then I met someone who didn't open a door for me. She walked out of it, sat beside me, and listened." Sienna's eyes sparkled. People wiped tears. "She didn't hand me a ladder. She handed me tools. And together, we built something bigger than either of us." He nodded toward the building. "This place isn't just for kids who want to build tables. It's for anyone who's ever been told they don't belong. It's for the quiet fixers, the ones without suits, the ones who know what calluses mean." He smiled. His voice was calm, strong. "It's for people like me." Applause burst through the air, but he didn't rush. He let the moment breathe. Then he said, "We named it Brooks and Taylor. But the truth is, this place doesn't belong to us. It belongs to the future." Later that afternoon, after the crowd had gone and the sun began to set, Jalen and Sienna sat on the back steps of the building. Kids ran through the field behind them. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "You nailed it." "I didn't stutter," he teased. "Nope. You just turned every grown man into a puddle." He laughed. But the sound carried something deeper, something healed. Do you ever miss it? He asked. The old world? Sienna shook her head. Not for a second. I didn't lose power. I found a better way to use it. He nodded. You remember what you said to me after the conference? Which part? That loving something real was worth losing everything else. She looked up at him. Yeah. He lifted her hand and kissed her knuckles. You were right. That evening, as dusk softened the sky, the workshop glowed from within. Light spilled from tall windows. Laughter echoed inside. The sound of hammers, of dreams. An old pickup rolled to a stop down the road. Mrs. Temple, the retired school librarian, rolled down her window and looked out with teary eyes. She'd lived in the town her whole life. They turned a scrapyard into a sanctuary, she whispered. She wasn't wrong. Inside, Jalen helped a student line up a drill. Easy pressure. Let the tool do the work. The boy looked up. You ever get scared? Jalen smiled. All the time. So, how do you know you're doing the right thing? He paused. When it feels bigger than you and scares you just enough to matter, that's how. The bell over the door jingled. Sienna walked in, holding a small framed photo. She handed it to Jalen. It was a picture of him, taken from behind, teaching. Written on the frame in neat handwriting, Love builds. He looked at the photo, then at her. Where do we hang it? She smiled. At the heart.